When music speaks, the afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows of Riverside Children's Home, casting warm patches of light across the worn wooden floors. Robert Harrison adjusted his expensive tie as he walked through the hallway, his leather shoes clicking against the linoleum. As the CEO of Harrison Industries, he was used to boardrooms and business meetings, not orphanages and charity visits. This visit was different from his usual routine. The board of directors had suggested he make a public appearance at the children's home, something about community outreach and positive publicity. Robert had agreed, thinking it would be a simple afternoon of handshakes and photo opportunities. At 55, Robert had built an empire from nothing. His company employed thousands, and his name appeared on the city's most important buildings. Yet something had been missing from his life since his wife passed 5 years ago. The big house felt empty, and success had begun to taste like ashes in his mouth. Mrs. Elizabeth Chen, the director of Riverside Children's Home, greeted him at the entrance with a warm but tired smile. She had run the home for 20 years, watching children come and go, always hoping they would find families who would love them. "Mr. Harrison, thank you so much for coming," Mrs. Chen said, leading him through the main hall. "The children are very excited to meet you." Robert nodded politely, already planning how quickly he could finish this visit and return to his office. Around them, children of all ages played and studied, their laughter echoing off the walls. In the corner of the main room sat an old upright piano, its black paint chipped and faded. Several keys were yellowed with age, and one of the pedals squeaked when pressed. Robert glanced at it and chuckled. "Does anyone actually play that old thing?" he asked Mrs. Chen. "Oh, yes," she replied with a gentle smile. "We have several children who love music. It may not look like much, but it still makes beautiful sounds." As they continued their tour, Robert met dozens of children. Some were shy, hiding behind Mrs. Chen's skirt. Others were bold, asking him questions about his cars and his company. All of them shared the same quiet hope in their eyes. The hope that someday, someone would choose them to be part of a family. Near the end of his visit, they returned to the main room where a small group of children had gathered around the old piano. Among them stood a girl who couldn't have been more than 10 years old. Her name was Sophie Martinez, and she had lived at Riverside for 3 years, ever since her grandmother passed away. Sophie was smaller than the other children her age, with dark hair that needed cutting and clothes that had been mended many times. Her shoes were too big for her feet, donated from a local church. But her eyes held a spark of something special, something that caught Robert's attention. "Sophie loves the piano," Mrs. Chen said softly. "She taught herself to play by listening to old records and practicing when the other children are asleep." Robert looked at the girl and then at the battered instrument. An idea formed in his mind. Not a serious one, just the kind of casual comment successful people sometimes make. "Well," Robert said with a laugh, loud enough for everyone to hear, "if she can really play that piano, I'll adopt her myself." The children gasped and giggled. Mrs. Chen's eyes widened with surprise. Sophie stood perfectly still, her small hands clenched at her sides. Robert immediately regretted his words. He had spoken without thinking, the way he sometimes did in business meetings when he wanted to make a point. But this wasn't a boardroom. These were real children with real feelings and real hopes. "Oh, Mr. Harrison," Mrs. Chen said quietly. "You don't need to—" "It's okay," Sophie interrupted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I understand. Adults say things they don't mean sometimes." But something in the girl's voice made Robert pause. There was no anger in her words, no bitterness. Just a quiet acceptance that broke his heart in a way he didn't expect. Sophie walked slowly to the piano bench and sat down. Her feet didn't quite reach the floor, so they dangled freely as she placed her small hands on the keys. The room fell silent. Even the younger children stopped their playing to watch. Sophie closed her eyes for a moment, as if she were listening to something only she could hear. Then she began to play. The first notes that came from the old piano were soft and gentle, like raindrops on a quiet lake. Robert recognized the melody. It was Chopin's Minute Waltz, but Sophie was playing it slowly, drawing out each note with careful precision. As she continued to play, something magical happened. The scratches on the piano seemed to disappear. The yellowed keys became ivory white again in Robert's mind. The squeaky pedal became part of the music's rhythm. But it wasn't just the technical skill that stunned Robert. It was the emotion pouring from this small girl's heart through her fingertips. Every note carried the weight of longing, the pain of loss, and the stubborn hope that refused to die. The melody shifted, becoming more complex. Sophie's hands moved across the keys with confidence that seemed impossible for someone so young and untrained. She played as if the piano were an extension of her soul, each note a word in a language that only the heart could understand. Robert found himself moving closer, drawn by something he couldn't name. He watched Sophie's face as she played, seeing a peace there that he hadn't felt in years. Her eyes remained closed, but tears were streaming down her cheeks. Not tears of sadness, but tears of pure expression. The music built to a crescendo, then faded to a whisper. Sophie played the final notes with such tenderness that several of the watching children wiped their eyes. When the last note faded into silence, no one moved. Robert stood frozen, his heart pounding in his chest. He had heard professional pianists play in concert halls around the world. He had attended galas where famous musicians performed for wealthy audiences. But he had never heard anything like what this small, forgotten girl had just shared with them. "Sophie," he said, his voice rough with emotion he didn't understand. She opened her eyes and looked at him, expecting to see the polite smile adults wore when they were trying to be kind about something they didn't really care about. Instead, she saw tears in his eyes. "Where did you learn to play like that?" Robert asked, kneeling down to her level. "I didn't learn it anywhere," Sophie said softly. "The music was just always inside me. My grandmother used to say that some people are born with songs in their hearts, and they have to let them out or they'll burst." Robert thought about his own heart, how empty it had felt for so long. He thought about his big house with its silent rooms and his successful life that somehow felt incomplete. "Sophie," he said, and his voice was different now. Not the voice of a CEO making a business deal, but the voice of a man who had just discovered something precious he didn't know he was looking for. "I meant what I said." Mrs. Chen stepped forward, her eyes wide with surprise and hope. "You don't have to," she began. "I know I don't have to," Robert said, never taking his eyes off Sophie. "But I want to. If Sophie would like to have a father who would love to hear her play piano every day, I would be honored to be that father." Sophie stared at him for a long moment, searching his face for the truth. "You really mean it?" she whispered. "I really mean it," Robert said. "I have a house with a music room that has been empty for too long. It needs someone to fill it with beautiful sounds." Months later, in the music room of Robert's house, Sophie played her new grand piano while her father listened from his favorite chair. The room was filled with the warmth of music and the deeper warmth of a family that had found each other. Sometimes the most important decisions we make happen in a single moment, when our hearts recognize something our minds haven't yet understood. Robert had walked into Riverside Children's Home as a successful but lonely man, and he had left as a father whose life had been made complete by the music of a little girl's heart.